The Space Launch System is the long-awaited NASA project that will get humanity back to the vicinity of the Moon. In 2011, Congress told NASA to have it ready to launch in 2016. There have been many complications due to changing specifications by Congress that have added enormously to the costs. The Orion capsule, an updated version of the 1960s Apollo capsule with new, modern technology on board, will get the crews back and forth to lunar orbit and return them to land on Earth. It has had its inevitable changes too, extending the process. Part of the project includes a new space station orbiting the Moon, called the Lunar Gateway. Its purpose will be to provide a unique platform for research, provide communications with the lunar surface and a link to Earth, launch and retrieve surface exploration vessels, as well as for sustaining short-term command crews while astronauts are on the lunar surface below. Smaller than the ISS, this station is a cooperative venture of several nations' space agencies, including JAXA, ESA, CSA, and NASA, as well as some skilled companies to put it all together. SpaceX will deliver the pieces starting with a $332 million flight to deliver the Power and Propulsion Element, or PPE, and the Habitation and Logistics Outpost, or HALO, which forms the basis of the station. Once the ESA's IHAB module is added, the available space inside should be the equivalent of a double-decker bus. The system's overall purpose is more complex than simply returning to the Moon. It will allow us to establish a permanent base there, where we will discover if the low gravity of the Moon is sufficient to sustain humans without harm. It is designed to let us practice long-duration survival, such as will be required on a trip to neighboring Mars or Venus, the asteroid field, and later, some of the moons of our gas giants. By being close to home, we're better able to deal with emergencies like appendicitis, abscessed teeth, broken limbs, exposure to vacuum, amputations, oxygen loss, and failed greenhouses or other technologies not removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere or refreshing oxygen supplies. These would be nearly impossible to resolve with our current experience levels on a multi-month journey to Mars or Venus. We're not prepared for that, but this system will teach us what to expect and how to react. The USSR's Sputnik program launched Sputnik 1 on October 4, 1957, and Sputnik 2 30 days later on November 3rd. This forced the United States to get busy and launch their first successful venture into space, the Jupiter C, on January 31, 1958. The space capability frightened people because if you could put something into space, you could put a nuclear bomb just about anywhere on the planet that you choose. Canadian General Gerald Bull responded with HARP, or the High Altitude Research Project, made possible by using Canadian government funds, researchers from McGill University, an association with a United States Lieutenant General named Arthur Trudeau, and an influential scientist, Dr. Charles Murphy, from their military. Bull's idea was a long gun in line with his air-to-air missile research, using a shotgun approach where a shrapnel cloud would be fired at incoming ICBMs. At those high speeds, even grazing one piece would make the missile disintegrate. The guns were eventually installed on the island of Barbados due to its proximity of 13 degrees to the equator. After much research and many modifications on Canada Day, July 1, 1965, the 36-meter-long gun fired a test projectile to an altitude of 150 kilometers, well above the recognized outer space boundary, making Canada the third nation to launch something into space. Bull, however, hated governments and politicians interfering in science research, and his battles with them ended up in animosity and government funding being withdrawn by both Canada and the US, and the project ended. John F. Kennedy, however, needed something to hang an inspiring speech upon. He didn't care about space or research. As stated to his staff advisors and NASA officials in 1962, "I'm not that interested in space." But space could potentially really resonate with the public and get him support by coddling the fear of the communist menace. By the end of the decade, as predicted in his Rice University speech, people were on the Moon. By 1972, with political goals having been achieved, the moon project was shut down. Now, half a century later, we're finally ready to go back. Whatever you think about the space program, it has paid back every penny ever invested into it hundreds of times over. It has saved millions of lives with accurate weather forecasting and enhanced public safety. It has provided new consumer goods and, best of all, provided absolutely amazing medical advances, even possibly the reason you're alive today. It has made technological improvements to energy management, environmental management, planet-wide communications, information technology, and it has enhanced industrial productivity, all while enhancing our knowledge of the threats to our planet and teaching us how to save ourselves if a big asteroid or comet comes our way. Surprisingly then, a return to the moon was not a priority for NASA. The budget had been so strangled by political expediency that there was never any real possibility of a return to the moon. It took some private citizens becoming wealthy enough to allow private enterprise to step in and kickstart the process once again. Finally, politics, international stature, and the idea of creating a legacy ended up with politicians directing NASA to focus on getting back to the moon in 2017. All these little projects NASA had been persevering toward that end were consolidated under the new name Artemis, and the new multi-billion-dollar venture was underway. The SLS proposed in 2006 was finally moving again to replace the now-defunct Space Transportation System, or STS, aka the Shuttle Program. The problem critics pointed out was that NASA was contractually obligated to deal with approved suppliers of services. Not incidentally, those that would benefit senators and congressmen in specific areas of jurisdiction, instead of the best people for the job. Another stipulation was the congressionally imposed cost-plus pricing scheme. This meant that the government agreed to pay whatever the cost actually was, and anything at all that is extra, allowing producers to have delays and problems to make more money for no real additional work. Legislatures also have no technical expertise, but specify which components are to be used, fuel types, and engine specifications. For example, there were 44 shuttle engines available, constantly recycled and reused, since they cost $40 million each. The SLS will use 4 for each launch and then drop them in the ocean, meaning they can launch 11 times. This makes it very difficult to assemble a safe, reliable ship in the piecemeal fashion. To make matters worse, they kept changing specifications on a whim, piling on additional costs. Rockets should not be casually disposed of after a single use. Instead, contractors should have made design decisions based on efficiency and safety. Contractors should have used modern engines and technologies and not be forced to rely on anti-dated equipment like the insanely expensive solid rocket boosters or incorporating used shuttle main engines into the mix. Contractors should be paid for accomplishing goals and penalized for failures and falling behind schedule. Politicians should play no part in the equipment or specifications decision-making process because their state happens to make component X, or their state makes X type of fuel. The current cost will be $4.1 billion per 4-person launch for the SLS, or a little over $1 billion per person. To get 80 kilograms or 175 pounds to a geosynchronous equatorial orbit costs under $5 million with alternate technology. How much do you weigh? Costly, yes, but only 5% of the cost of SLS. Other methodologies can get you to low Earth orbit for just $250,000. Various companies are suggesting $10 a kilogram or $4.50 a pound as an achievable rate in the near future. Since 2006, the cost for SLS has been $49.9 billion to get to the first launch. By 2025, the cost is predicted to be a total of $93 billion. Experts agree that these costs are completely unsustainable, and critics argue that NASA contracts are being used as money pumps to get cash into states' economies instead of working to develop genuinely useful technology to advance scientific knowledge. SpaceX, on the other hand, being a business interested in making a profit while still being competitive, suggests they can do the job for a few hundred millions. It has only cost $4 billion to develop their vehicle Starship, just 1/10 the cost of the SLS, or 1/12 the cost of the Saturn V development program from the 1960s. Private enterprise is so efficient that in all likelihood the SLS will only launch 3 times, and only because of the inertia of the program. That will include the uncrewed test orbit of the Moon, the crewed orbit of the Moon, and finally landing on the Moon, notably in a SpaceX Starship, not a NASA vehicle. After that, the public seeing the difference between what private companies can accomplish for a sustainable price versus the cost to governments overloaded with bureaucracy and silly contractual rules and obligations will result in permanently shelving the SLS. Its contractors' inefficiencies, errors, and production delays it was supposed to launch in 2016. All of this will be the cause of its own demise, but that will release NASA to commit its money to real space projects, getting more science done for far fewer dollars. NASA will likely never develop a spaceship or engine in-house again after this. In fact, they will almost certainly contract all of their future flights with established private launch companies like SpaceX, Blue Origins, and Virgin Galactic, and space accommodations with companies like Orion Span that are intent on getting into the hotel business in space, but whose volumes could be equally useful for scientific laboratories and commercial manufacturing in microgravity. Indeed, a spinning hotel to simulate gravity for clients would be great for keeping astronauts in good physical condition on a multi-month journey to Mars. Strap an ion engine on one end and off you go, arriving still in condition to be able to walk on Mars' surface instead of spending weeks getting your muscle tone back. When you break it down, however, the cost is only $87 per year for the estimated 165 million U.S. taxpayers for the next 3 years, or just 1.025% of federal education spending. That's a real bargain compared to the $4,374 per taxpayer spent on military expenditures. Taxes have not always been well spent in the last 8 decades. SLS, Orion, Artemis, and the Lunar Gateway were and are essential right now. What they will accomplish will be an inspiration to future space development. The SLS itself has also done us the remarkable service of throwing into sharp relief just how badly government officials can interfere with good science through pork barreling. Politicians should be sufficiently embarrassed or humiliated in front of all these big companies when they can no longer offer endless space program money to them in return for their support. The companies that have been bleeding our space program and tax bases dry will be obligated to compete with all of the genuine innovators, and everything will get better and cheaper. Development should be driven by private commercial companies that you can invest in. Merit should be the deciding factor, rather than which politician you have in your pocket. The government can then get back into the business of managing the economy, and space development can be left in the hands of the people that are innately interested in the success rather than how much money or power they can derive from it. Sadly, the NASA system, although exciting, was never designed to serve you as a passenger. It was never going to take you into space. Its purpose has always been to expand the horizons of science, to increase human knowledge, and ultimately, it is designed to save humanity. The truth is that we live in a cosmic bowling alley, where gravitational disturbances can send a big rock careening in from the asteroid field to smack into Earth, wiping out all of us. Even further out into the opaque Oort cloud are rocks and comets galore, which are perfectly capable of erasing humanity from existence. We're the first beings on this planet with the intelligence to control our own destinies. We've mastered technologies that could save our planet from such a fate. But we need to get millions off of the planet too, just in case something unpredictable happens to assure humanity's survival. That is why we need the Moon. That is why we need Mars. Humans cannot be a one-planet species and expect to survive. Remember what happened to the last creatures that didn't have the ability or sense to look up and prepare.